thank you for now. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm sorry I'm actually a bit sick, just as Ella, but decided to come here regardless because I was really looking forward to it. And I'm quite proud that this event happened. Söke has been an advisor to the Blockchain Hub since we started 2 years ago, more or less. And I'm very happy that you also started your own initiative and community around this. So maybe a few words to the Blockchain Hub. I started it in Berlin. Our idea is to educate the general public about blockchain, the decentralized web, token economy, so to make it inclusive, not exclusive to only a handful of coders who understand what it is. And so the idea has kind of expanded, and we have a few blockchain hubs all over Europe and now maybe also in Brazil. So, and it's a network of decentralized hubs. We're all autonomous in the spirit of blockchain, but we share the same vision and we share some resources and conduct some project where it makes sense, but we're actually all autonomous. So it's not blockchain central here in Berlin. Anyhow, I'd like to talk a little bit about the token economy and ICOs. It's buzzwords all around, but I feel that this whole thing is so new that there is a lot of misunderstanding or partial understanding around what is a token, what is crypto economics, how to evaluate a token, how to conduct a token sale. So I hope to bring, I know that you probably all have different backgrounds, so some know more and some know less. I'd like to walk you through my personal logic of how I see this whole thing. So I hope this can be of some value. All right, so I would like to refer to crypto tokens as a currency of distributed internet tribes. And I'll get back into that in a minute. So yes, obviously we all have heard of ICOs, which, just to make sure that everybody is on the same page for what it is, it's actually, in my opinion, the killer application after Bitcoin, right? Everybody was waiting for a killer application, and I think nobody expected that the ICO would be a killer app. Because over the last year, we have seen that all of a sudden it is possible to conduct a kind of crowdfunding or crowd investing entirely peer-to-peer on the blockchain without a middleman. And that's quite a thing, you know? That is amazing. And that is actually, in my opinion, the killer app that got so much, is getting this technology a lot of attention at the moment. So what does it mean? It means that, as you know, teams can pre-sell their tokens, whatever they are and whatever they stand for, to investors interested in supporting the project or profiting the project in the future. So if we look how crowdfunding or crowd investing has been done so far, like especially crowd investing in the Web 2, you write a business plan, you prepare an elevator pitch just in case you meet someone, and you have only a minute. You look to get personal intros to what's happening here.
Oh, sorry. It's a Bluetooth loudspeaker. My cell phone.
Am I too close? I don't
No,
know.
no.
Okay, so you hope to get some personal introductions to some VCs, like Berlin Innovation Ventures, maybe. And for that, you prepare yourself with an elevator pitch and a business plan to hopefully get some funding for your projects. That means that you have to talk to institutions, and the VC or angel investor would give you some money, some fiat currency. In the Web 3, you prepare a white paper. So far it's been like that, right? You prepare a white paper, you spread the information about what you do and how you do it on social media, Twitter, websites, Slack, GitHub, Telegram, whatever. Your target audience is everyone, and the means to do it is through this peer-to-peer fundraising called ICO, Initial Coin Offering. And you issue your tokens and get more or less fiat currency for it, or tokens. Anyhow, so most people, it's actually, the name is quite misguided because in very rare instances is an ICO similar to an IPO, where you issue shares of a company. The DAO last year was actually such a rare exception to most of the ICOs we've seen before and after, where really the DAO was supposed to be a distributed or a decentralized investment fund on top of the Ethereum blockchain, where proportional to the DAO tokens that you were holding, you could vote for projects that would be funded or not. And that was actually, as I said, an exception. It is much more similar to crowd investing, where crowdfunding, where investors or funders can get coins for supporting a startup idea. If the startup is successful, the tokens will be worth more. So it does also have a speculation aspect to it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have any rights attached to that token, except for it can, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have some voting rights or whatever. Depending on the white paper, the tokens can have very different properties and values attached to them. We'll get into that. Anyhow, if you look at the history of how this whole thing started, I don't know if you're aware of it, but it's quite amazing. So, kind of dating back to 2013, Mastercoin was the first kind of ICO. They set up a contract where you could burn bitcoins and get master coins, and they raised back then 500,000, and that was a lot for such a thing, and 500,000 US dollars by burning bitcoin and issuing master coin. Then we had a few others like MadeSafe in between, already 7 million in April 2014, and one of the big breakthroughs was Ethereum. In 4 weeks, 18 million US dollar at its time. And then we had some things in between, but what kicked everything really off last year, I think, was the DAO, with some say 150, depends on the day of valuation, to 180 million US dollars at its peak. Within 4 weeks, the DAO raised that enormous amount of money, entirely peer-to-peer, and everybody started looking at that. And this is when, yes, a lot of media attention outside crypto came into crypto. And well, the story from there went on. I think what's safe to say, I mean, 150 million is almost nothing. If we look at what has been happening, we stopped, this is like July, and after July we didn't document this anymore, but I think if you've been, like, we've surpassed, I think the next one will be 1 billion. We've already surpassed the 300 million, so Status got 270 million. I would like to point out one thing which was really interesting, Gnosis. They did a type of ICO, because the way you conduct ICOs is very different. On the Blockchain Hub website, we have information on kind of types of ICOs. So most of the ICOs, when they started out, they issued the tokens with a regressive price, so or a progressive price. If you would buy in early, you would get a discount, and if you would buy in later, you would pay a higher price to kind of incentivize early investors. So Gnosis tried a different auction, and they called it the Dutch auction, and thinking that they wanted to play an intelligent game at a time where a lot of stupid money was in that market, in my opinion, and thinking that it was designed in a way that people should pay, the price would decrease over time. And the idea was that people would only pay the price that they thought would be a rational investment decision, a rational valuation. Well, at the moment, we're in super bullish markets, a lot of irrational investors there. And within a few minutes, as most of all the other ICOs, this thing was sold out. Which meant that the way the token sale was designed, if it had been going on for more days, which would have meant that the price would have gone up, and the number of tokens issued, the percentage of tokens issued would have been more. But because it sold out on the first day, they only issued 4.17% of their tokens, raising, very important, how much was it? Yeah, 13 million in US dollars. But the whole market valuation of all the tokens, they still held 95.8% of all the tokens, meaning that the market valuation was over 300 million. And that's a problem, because basically, Gnosis de facto could act as a central bank manipulating the price. So that's only one of many stories to look at. Raising the amount of money raised is only one indicator. You have to look at the fact how many tokens of the total token supply was actually issued. And how can the team, how much percentage has the team left, and can they manipulate the price? Now, Gnosis was kind of, the team was a bit blindsided by that themselves. They didn't expect that. I don't understand why. I had vivid discussions with them. They truly believe in Homo economicus, whereas I think that most people are Homer Simpson when it comes to investment decisions. Certainly at this point in time. So, but they did a very wise thing. They announced that they put everything in a multi-sig wallet, except for like they took a small percentage of their own tokens out to get the startup going, but put the rest, 99%, in a multi-sig wallet locked for a year to assure the market that they wouldn't be manipulating the price, at least for that year. We'll see what happens later. Anyhow, okay, let's not get into details. What is a token, anyhow? What is a token? Question? Anyone?
Public key address.
Okay, yeah, that's on a technical level. On a asset level?
It's something that you hold on to for a certain value, which is even known at the moment of ICO, but may hold a larger value in the future for a smaller value.
Okay, so it's an asset.
It's an asset.
Okay, what type of asset? Okay, exactly. So I'll get into that, right? It's the Wild West. It's the very early stages, so it's not like a class. You should actually know the answer because we all don't know the answer. Some people say it's a completely new asset class. I think it's difficult, right? So I'll try to. I think we will figure it out as we go in the next few years. As I said before, I would like to refer to blockchain tokens of currencies of distributed internet tribes. Why? I mean, if you remember, or for those who know the history of Bitcoin in detail, Bitcoin started out to be peer-to-peer money without banks. Some people still think it's like some digital cash. No, it's not digital cash. It's peer-to-peer money without banks and without bank managers. And that is actually super revolutionary. It's not a file that you send from A to B. Actually, Bitcoin is a wrong term because there is no coin that you can own. It's an entry in a database, right? You're not sending something from server to server over a peer-to-peer network. That's the whole point. So that symbol in itself is a misrepresentation for what it actually is. But I think probably we need something to hold on to because anyhow, it's amazing what Bitcoin did. But what does it mean, peer-to-peer money without banks? It means that we don't need centralized banks anymore, where data is stored on a server, and the banks act as a trusted third party verifying a transaction. If I send you money, peer-to-peer, right? I don't know you, I don't trust you. We want to make sure that I actually have that money. You want to make sure that, and I want to make sure that you actually get the money. So we're moving with Bitcoin to this distributed way of verifying transactions where we combine peer-to-peer networks with cryptography and using crypto-economic incentive mechanisms to incentivize this distributed network of actors to confirm the transactions according to the rules in the code, right? Because what does auto-enforceable code help me? if I cannot how can I make sure that a network of actors who do not know and trust each other, who have the same code on their computer, verifies transactions in the correct way. And this is done with what we call these cryptoeconomic aspects that are tied to the token using game theory. So basically, Bitcoin is a protocol that is based on rule of code, saying that you don't need to trust centralized entities. You can trust that the code will be automatically enforced through the smart contract, and the code will be automatically enforced by this peer-to-peer network of computers if and when the conditions are met. Great. But how do you make sure that it is really enforced by those actors, and that those actors don't start to manipulate transactions or are not corrupted? You incentivize them economically to make it really, really expensive for someone to attack the network. Do I need to explain this? I'm not quite sure what the knowledge here in the room is.
Like the proof of work thing? I think like we are aware of that, like how it's...
So the point is that this token now allows me, and I think that's why we call it distributed internet tribes, because we're moving away from these kind of organizations. Whether it's political organizations or private organizations, for-profit, non-profit, doesn't really matter. In the world today, we've always had those top-down structures, some kind of top-down management, one legal entity using employment contracts between the stakeholders within the entity, and using private contracts with the suppliers and all the partners, and one legal entity. Now, thanks to Bitcoin and the consensus rules, the crypto-economic consensus rules that are tied to the token, this allows a network of actors who do not trust and know each other, different stakeholders like users, miners, exchanges, interact with each other just by rule of code. And this is quite revolutionary. And why is it important in the context of the token? Because the consensus mechanism is an integral part, is tied to the token. You can mine the token in Bitcoin by validating transactions, and this is kind of defined in the consensus mechanism on the consensus layer. So the consensus layer kind of is the monetary policy of the token of that distributed internet tribes. It's like the consensus layer is like the chairman, the decentralized chairman of the Federal Reserve that decides over supply and demand of a certain currency, and the how and when and what is kind of the code that was predefined, and can only be operated by consensus of the whole network. And if there is not a consensus, there will be a fork. And that is what a token is in Bitcoin, replacing management with code and disrupting kind of organizations. But what came? Bitcoin was open source, so anyone could take this code, modify it, and do their own better version, cryptocurrency. So we have many, many altcoins, as you know, evolve over time after Bitcoin, who tried to do their own token. They're better, faster, more transparent, less transparent kind of peer-to-peer money. But at some point, Ethereum came along and they said, okay, what if we take the idea of blockchain, but decouple the blockchain layer from the smart contract layer? And this Ethereum, and create this kind of decentralized world computer. And they wanted to have peer-to-peer energy trading and peer-to-peer, ride sharing and peer-to-peer Airbnb, apartment sharing without Airbnb. I think nobody foresaw that we would have peer-to-peer investment. ICOs is what became the real killer application on top of Ethereum, and that's one of the most important aspects, where now I can kind of define a currency, a token, on the application layer on top of the blockchain layer of Ethereum. Right? Bitcoin doesn't have that application layer. Smart contract is in the blockchain layer. But on Ethereum I can, and on top of all the alternative currencies, alternative blockchains like Zcash and Monero, which are actually blockchains and they have their token, their native token, we now have the possibility to have application tokens, which are basically defined in the smart contract. And the rule of who is allowed to do when and what in the network, and what the role of the token is, and which rights are attached to the token, are defined in the smart contract. Right? So yeah, we have seen a lot of tokens, but what is the role of the token? Now, first of all, we have to ask ourselves, as I said before, where is the token? Is it a native blockchain token like Ether, like Bitcoin, like Litecoin, like Zcash, like a token on the blockchain layer? Or is it an application token, like Gnosis or Augur or whatever, all these things, status, etc. Because that's, the native token is usually based on proof of work or some proof of stake. Ethereum is migrating, and it's an integral part. It has these crypto-economic aspects that are supposed to make the network fault tolerant and attack resistant, which means that you design it in a way that even if most of the network is corrupted by whatever reason, the decentralized consensus mechanism is still intact. And this is actually, it's not an easy thing to do. This is mathematically super complex. I don't understand it, but I understand it's complex. Maybe we can hear more from Ilan. Now, what has happened here on the application layer, these tokens have very, very different functions, depending on what was defined in the white paper. And we have no standards yet. So nobody can tell you what the role of a token is unless you read the white paper and you try and understand it. And very often in the white paper it's not really defined. It's one of the problems we have right now. Anyhow, so in general, what are the different aspects, at least on the blockchain layer, of a token? So one definitely is the currency aspect, Bitcoin. It is a currency. It's kind of the store of value that is tradable and transferable peer-to-peer without the bank and other middlemen. Now, Ether was never intended to be peer-to-peer money. It's more kind of the fuel of the network. It's like what you need to pay for transactions for the computing power of Ethereum. So these currencies can also, in addition to these crypto tokens, in addition to being a currency, can also be fuel of the network, right? So for example, in Bitcoin, actually, you pay for transactions in Bitcoin. In Ether, you pay for computing power. For Ether and SIA, for example, you would pay for file storage. Right? So that is very different functions. The tokens are the fuel of the network, which means that kind of they're used to reward stakeholders for the network, for the services. And the third aspect is the speculation aspect, especially from the investor side. So the idea and the way it's also designed in a way is that the bigger the network is, and the more people contribute to the network, the more it will be worth. And that is kind of, the more resilient it will be, thus the more it will be worth. That is kind of the speculation aspect. This is something it's not set in stone. It's the way we try to define it at the blockchain hub, right? You will find out there different schemes of maybe rules of the token. And this is our point of view. And that might change soon. Yeah.
Just a quick question to the
Yes.
chart. Does it relate to native tokens or application tokens or both?
for me, relates more to native tokens, right? On the native level, the way they're designed, it's like this. Application tokens is a super wild west. It's whatever, you know?
Exactly.
That's a big problem right now. So now when it comes to type of tokens, so we have like, where's the token? Is it on the native layer, application layer? What are the different roles? App tokens can also have those roles, depending on how they're designed. This is also a bit arbitrary, right? There are different terminologies now coming up. So I would say there are kind of usage tokens, work tokens, and asset-backed tokens. Right? Usage tokens, in our definition, are required to use network services wherever ownership is required to use that service. Right? That could be a definition. Then work tokens is a token that gives users the right to contribute to the blockchain network or a decentralized autonomous smart contract, right? To earn in exchange for the work. And an asset-backed token is actually the simplest one. It's basically a digital representation on the blockchain of a physical object. There is a very interesting piece that Vitalik wrote about tokens lately. I forgot that he called the usage tokens a bit differently, and he has, I completely forgot how he called them. It's, I would start reading up on what Vitalik has lately been writing. So, what is the problem with ICOs, in my opinion? Currently, we still, but I think this is gradually changing, we have a complete lack of standards. When a team starts to announce a token sale, they completely design the type of token sale, how the token sale is conducted, and what the role of the token is to complete under the discretion of the team that issues that. And whether, so we don't have any standards defining, and that might not necessarily be a bad thing, but it's very intransparent still for the uneducated investor, right? Educated investors is not a problem. The uneducated investor might be a problem. Because of this lack of standards, it's hard to understand what you're investing in. What is the type of your token? What does your token do? Which right does it give you? This is usually defined in the white paper, but a lot of the white papers we've seen lately don't really define the role of the token, yet people invest millions into it. This is a problem, this is a bubble that will burst soon, and the collateral damage will be there. But I guess that's very normal also, in a sense. So far there is a lack of standards, but there are more and more people pushing for kind of community standards for token sales, so there is more transparency about what is happening. So I think we will see a lot going on here. Second thing is regulation. Up until recently, when the SEC first started publishing some official recommendations in China, in this last 6 weeks, a little bit has happened. But before that, it was completely unregulated. So the Wild West, which also means that there is no investors protection, especially for the uneducated investors, but also there is no protection for the people conducting the token sales. They're completely out there not knowing whether they're potentially violating laws or not violating laws. So having some standards here and having some regulatory certainty will also be good for innovation if the regulation doesn't hinder innovation. This is something that we're trying to lobby for in Germany, at the Bundesverband Blockchain, to have regulation, but not to hinder innovation, right? Yeah.
Just a question, so if you say, so why then, so I just learned in Switzerland to make an ICO costs like 100,000 or 200,000, so what then the lawyers are charging for if there is no regulation, or is this regulation not there in Germany but it's there in Switzerland?
Well, in Switzerland, it's not in Switzerland, it's in Zug. And Zug, because they're the cantons, they have their own kind of monetary policy, I think. So I'm not a legal scholar, and I don't exactly know it, but the way I understood it, that there is this loophole that a regulatory loophole in Zug from the times, I think, back when there was this wie heißt das, Schwundwährung in the 1930s, I believe. From a time also, so there was this loophole that made it, that was applicable. It's not a loophole, it was conducted for this kind of regional currencies from the early 2000s, and it actually fits very well the type for a token sale. So you had some legal certainty protecting the type of assets, and this is why it's only in Zug, because only they have that regulation. And what then happened is that once a few people started going there, and I think Zug also started hopping on that blockchain train and making some proactive blockchain laws, adding more security. And it's also a lot of propaganda. Now a lot of people say that, oh, MME, that law company that knows how token sales work, they're in Zug, and this is why we're going to Zug. It might not be the best decision for your, ICO. But I think this is a little bit how it happened.
Can I say something? I
Yes.
think the reason is also the Ethereum Foundation was in Zug.
The
Before
what?
Ethereum Foundation.
Yes, also.
So I think this has led a lot of talent to this area. I mean,
But- Maybe I'm not very. Maybe they were also in Zug because of this loophole. I think.
Yeah, I don't know why they were there. Actually, I'm always asking myself why they were there.
Well, one of the reasons.
Because
I mean,
actually the Ethereum Foundation is in liquidation. If you look at the commercial register in Zug, and they moved to Singapore. So I personally think this will change now a little bit this economy of ICOs as well,
Yes.
because it will move to Asia, I'm sure.
Well, we will see. I mean, Asia is also big, right? I mean, as the regulatory environment all over the world is waking up, this will change, and I think this will make change soon, very fast. So just watch out for it. Regulation is an aspect. As an investor, also as an investor, if you feel, for example, that it might give you a legal certainty if somebody conducts their ICO in Germany, because Germany is quite strict, maybe, right? So have a look at, if you want to invest into tokens, where are they incorporated? Yeah? Anyhow, I think regulation might bring some legal certainty in this. But the problem with regulation is, how do you regulate? Like in the internet, after the advent of the internet, I mean, in the beginning, emails were not legally recognized, and also where would you, what law applies, right, in the internet. And at some point, regulators all over the world said that the law applies of the country where the server is. So, but there is no server in the peer-to-peer network. So, so we have again a lawless, kind of not lawless, but unclear state of which law really applies. For different kinds of regulation of certain industries, but also tax law, right, liabilities. There are so many different legal aspects, and this is a whole new field, and there are so many uncertainties tied to it. So if you invest in a token sale, you should be aware of the fact that all of a sudden a regulator from somewhere might come and say, hey, you're violating our tax laws. Yeah, I'm not even seeing it. And then that startup might go bust because of that. So it's the Wild West, and this is what it's, and it's, we will need some more years to get some more certainty around that. But I do see a huge challenge of trying to regulate with national laws. It was already difficult in the internet, and now in the new internet with blockchain is even more difficult. I fear that they will regulate with KYC at the final customer, which is kind of in the end a police state, which I don't really like. So while blockchain promises us to bring us more freedoms, I fear that it might go in the wrong direction. Lack of standards, we said that, sorry. Type of token sale. Okay, we talked a little bit about, type of token sale, not type of token. So what kind of token sale is it actually? Is it a progressive price? Is it a regressive price? Is it a dark auction? Is it capped? Is it not capped? What is, because if it's capped, you know that there will only be this amount of tokens. What's the uncapped token sale? Isn't that Tezos?
Yeah.
It's like It's like whatever, you know? And why is that important? It's important for questions of inflation, of the price, if you want to evaluate the price in the future. So look at the type of token sale. Again, we don't have any standards. So how many tokens will be issued? What will be the distribution of publicly available token and tokens that are then also available to the team? So how much percentage of the tokens does the team control? And how many tokens are sold? That's becoming really an issue. Pre-ICO to early investors under the hood at a discount, right? So peer-to-peer and no central authorities my ass, I'm sorry. But we can see normal market structures getting in our nice crypto anarchy that we're trying to build. So unfortunately, it's not as fun as it used to be. We have the mass market pushing into this thing. So yes, how is the distribution of tokens? Is it capped? And how does the price evolve over which time? This would be very important to understand if you're trying to invest or design your own token sale, right? Are they greedy? Are they not greedy? Do they cap it or they're not cap it? For example, what I really like, BitNation now, they're conducting a token sale. They're capping it to 3 million, I think, or at least the pre-sale. I didn't look at it, but yeah. Okay, so yes, sold out in a few minutes. So we're definitely in a bullish phase. And there is a lot of hype, which isn't necessarily only a bad thing. It's also a good thing because it's attracting a lot of media attention of non-crypto anarchists, right? So it's promoting the technology. The problem with the hype is that a lot of what I call stupid money pushes into the market, which in my definition is money that doesn't understand the fundamental aspects of the technology, which means that when something happens, prices crash, they don't understand what's going on, and then that might lead to a sustainable long-term crash, market crash. But it's probably normal, and after that the technology will still evolve. And but I think we're in this hype phase. The question is when and how big will the bubble burst? This nobody really knows. You know, it could last another 2-3 years. It can burst tomorrow. If something like the DAO would happen now, the consequences will be much bigger for the market than last year. Because last year, most investors were quite educated. Yeah.
I have to disagree on this because look at Parity Technologies. It was hacked, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 months ago. It was also, I think, 100 million or something. They got 150. And you see, I mean, nobody apologized for it. And I mean, I did not invest in it, you know, but still I followed it.
You mean the multi-sig bug?
Yes, correct. In the Parity wallet, you know.
Yeah.
And you see, I mean,
but people, private individuals didn't lose their money. The teams lost the money. That's a very bad, different thing. Okay? It's not private individuals losing their money. What you're saying, what happened with the Parity bug multi-sig thing was that a handful of ICOs that had already been awarded money had the money in the multi-sig. Now it's just like 10 people who are already filthy rich, complaining that they're already filthy rich. I'm completely exaggerating, right? So I know personally people of one ICO. Luckily they conducted it in 3 stages, Eternity, and 2 of their multi-sigs was hacked, so they have 1 multi-sig intact. And yes, but the individuals were not affected. What I'm referring to is something like the DAO would happen today, and the prices crash like they did last time. Last time it was like early investors, it was mostly educated people or super people like my brother, even without understanding, but he's like, he knew it was risk capital, right? Now, even people like my dad and my grandmother, they want to invest in Bitcoin. If something like that happens and the price crashes, it will go down, and it will go down sustainably. Especially in Ethereum land, I'm not worried about Bitcoin. I'm worried about Ethereum, very different price dynamics. It's not limited, it's not a currency. The Ethereum price is based on the number, it's so, I don't want to say inflated, but it went up because of all those ICOs. And it went down because a lot of people cashed in on their ICOs, right? If one of these huge ICOs crashes in a bad way, I mean, we will, then everything that's Ethereum related would come down.
Yeah, but I think you should also have wallets that are solid, or the technology, to invest in it, to trust in it, And I think after this multi-sig wallet hack, I mean, I don't know, for me, I was thinking about it, honestly. So it's another, how can I say, it's another way of an error, not just a hack, also there can be a lot of
it will be, you never know what it is.
Correct.
Yes, a chain of events. Well, probably a chain of events, right? It was the same thing when the price of Bitcoin plummeted a few years ago. In the end, it was a chain of events that made it really, really plummet, right? And it could be a network attack of the Ethereum network after, a few things happening after the other, right? This Tezos thing is quite big. It will be probably a series of events. I agree.
One aspect on the sold in minutes, I read that there some people, some investors, some big investors had paid really high fees to get in first and get a lot of tokens and hold then a lot of these tokens and later on maybe manipulating the prices on the exchanges.
Yeah, I mean securities laws. Which one are you talking about?
There are some, but
of course. I mean, price manipulation, of course. I think Elad has some very interesting ideas by price manipulation by hard fork.
Yeah.
And I mean, you told me a year ago about that, and we can see it kind of a little bit in Bitcoin now.
Can? Oh, let's do it.
Bitcoin, yeah. I don't know. In a certain extent, this whole Bitcoin, silver, and gold, and platinum, and whatever is coming out. But yes, for sure. I mean, what do we have in the regulatory environment for securities? We have insider trading. Like among a number of people I know with the insider information they have, investing, I mean, there are laws out there keeping people who are inside. But what does insider mean in a peer-to-peer network of an open source product? How do we define insider laws in this new world? It gets more and more fuzzy, right? And I think I see a lot of challenges. This is a huge technology, but the technology is the smallest aspect of it. It's a socio-economical, technological revolution, and the technological aspect is the easiest, right? Because what does it mean for regulatory environments, peer-to-peer networks, etc., open source? It's not behind closed doors, so in theory, everybody knows how the code will be upgraded, but do people understand? Who has the capacity to understand on the consensus level of upgrading the Bitcoin code? I mean, it's a handful of people worldwide who really understand it, etc. So, as you can see, there are many, many aspects to what is going on now.
Just as a comment, insider trading was actually not illegal until very late. I think it's around the 40s or the 50s in Wall Street, in stock markets. So it's not surprising that we don't know what to do about it now.
Yes, I mean, definitely. Insider trading came at a later time, and it still is a thing. I mean, there is so much insider trading. Come on, Jamie Dimon. I mean, he is the head of JP Morgan. Like, is he stupid, or is he insider trading? Did he have some short sell thing going on the side through 70 agents? Yeah, probably, right? Or it's just like they really still wish to think that the world will stay the way it is. Could be both, right? So, how to evaluate an ICO? Well, We actually, and I don't have that yet, please follow us, I will blend it in later, Blockchain Hub on social media. We're working on a token model canvas, right? Like the business model canvas, a kind of a token evaluation kind of canvas that is a bit more like what I'm saying in short terms, to help people come to their own conclusion, right? And, but basically, the questions in this token evaluation canvas is like, how does the kind of, we already talked, what stage of the product, if it's about evaluating a token, it's like where is the token, is it pre-ICO or post-ICO? If it's pre-ICO, what stage is the project in, right? Is it just a landing page? Well then, forget it. You know, you have token sales of landing pages where there are no pictures of people, there is no address, and you're like, come on, should I trust you? They still get money. I would never put my money in there, right? Is it well structured, the white paper? Does it explain the technology in depth? Do they have a roadmap? And if you don't understand the roadmap because you don't have the technical insights, what do other people, the experts on Reddit, say, right? Does it so that would be the next thing. Does it survive swarm review and expert opinion? So you might not be an expert yourself, but you can identify who are the experts and what are they saying. Is anyone talking about it in the first place? If nobody is talking about it, might not be such a good idea to invest. Does it need a blockchain, or is there an off-chain solution to doing the same problem, etc., etc.? You see where it's going, right? Proof of concept. Some token sales, they already have like some proof of concept. Do they have, does the project have a kind of proof alpha version before fundraising, where there are a lot of Git commits on GitHub? Is there a testnet available? If not alpha version as well as white paper, how is the team, right? So you can see where this is going. Team is probably very important, but we also saw that I'm getting a lot of LinkedIn requests on, please, do you want to be an advisor for my ICO? Don't even answer them. Like, people are trying to get like very flashy advisors, so they can inflate their team. So are the people actual team members, or are they just representative advisors? Right? That was actually also something that happened with the DAO. Like the curators were actually not curators, they were identity oracles. And the curators, and because identity is still unresolved, like physical identity on the blockchain, and the only role of the curators of the DAO was to verify the physical identity of the people making a proposal to the DAO to make sure that they don't run off with the money, right? But they were unfortunately, I mean, at some point when Gavin went out, I became a curator. We were called curators, but we didn't curate anything. So that was very misleading. And the other thing was like people, because they just saw these, people, all these so-called curators, like Vitalik and Gavin, etc., on the website, they were like, okay, we can trust it, but none of them had really read the code, right? So, look at what you're investing in. Are there external audits of the code? Has it been running on a testnet for some time? So how secure is it, right? How safe is it? Especially looking back on what happened with the DAO. Legoland Compliance, we talked about it before. Where is the, not only where, in which country is the kind of token sale conducted, Switzerland, Germany, wherever, but also what kind of industry does that touch? If it's, for example, banking, if it's in the energy industry, these industries are healthcare industries, are highly regulated. So they might, or we even have seen token sales that where you can see in the white paper that they, like in every country, would violate regulations. So fingers back. Don't invest in token sales where you can already see it's a highly regulated market and somebody will sue them at some point soon, right? unless they've already like talked with authorities and it's a sandbox or something like that. So does national or international regulation apply? If yes, how could that affect the business model in the short or long term? Community. Do they run a blog, Reddit, Slack, etc.? How interactive are those social media activities? Are they reporting progress? Size of the community is very also important depending on the stage of the product. I mean, the DAO really had a huge community going for a year because it was also developed open source. And it will, like in the DAO's lab, you have thousands of people who are super active. And which didn't mean that the project didn't go belly up. But to the defense of the DAO, I mean, it really drew a lot of attention to the technology, and it's so early stages. It really is trial and error. And in the end, everything went well. So who are the founders, track record, previous project, technical know-how, formal education? So that's nothing new, really. Like investing in every startup, this is what you look at, right? Who are the founders? What's the funding structure? How was the project funded up until that point? Is there a cap on the crowd sale? Are the tokens issued limited to the initial crowd sale? What will be the final distribution of tokens, or is that not defined, right? In Bitcoin, you know that this is limited to 21 million, unless there is a consensus of the whole network to change that. But I think that will be difficult to achieve. What is the token distribution? We already talked about that. Are they putting too much money into marketing? I mean, today, because there are so many ICOs, that criteria has changed a bit because you need to draw attention. I think today, if you don't hire a professional ICO marketing company, you stand little chances to survive unless you're somebody like Gavin Wood and Polkadot, right? I think they probably didn't hire a professional ICO company. They don't need marketing because they already have that. They're already known by the community, but if you're a newbie in the community, you definitely need to invest a lot of money now into marketing. So it's a bit different now, but if it's just a flashy website, don't touch it, right? What's the market potential? Okay, and all these things, these are not specific to crypto, right? Everyone investing, that's normal due diligence when investing in something, right? What's the value proposition? How much demand will there be? Who are the competitors? Who are the partners? What is the social media buzz? Yeah, so I know it was a bit longer. I hope it gives some insight and follow us. We will be publishing this token model canvas soon. We will also, we're preparing this week, hopefully publishing in how to conduct an ICO, kind of an ICO roadmap for teams who want to prepare their own ICO. So maybe that will be helpful for you guys. Yep, thank you. Any more questions? I mean, we had some more comments.
So there's this comparison of VC funding to ICO funding. Obviously, I'm partial here.
Yes.
But I was wondering what you're thinking about the nature of the length and commitment of the involvement. Obviously, VC funding goes for years and years. You hold equity, you keep it for many years, you sell it maybe after a long time. ICO, you can buy, sell immediately unless there's some vesting that's hard-coded in the smart contract. It's like fluctuates. I personally don't know what's better. I have my own feeling that a long commitment is better in many ways, but I'm wondering what you think about the more liquid nature of ICO investment.
Well, I think that, unfortunately, I have to bring the Homer Simpson analogy, right? So the difference between the liquid markets, where everybody is an investor, it's like markets are stupid, yeah? The concept of the rational investor on the stock market is absurd, right? I would say 95% of the time, stock prices or token prices are overvalued or undervalued. Very rarely are they at the point where they actually reflect the value. Yeah? So we don't, and I think that VCs have a more rational perspective, right? Because they're more educated, hopefully. They understand the dynamics of projects better, the phases and stages of the technology and adoption, and since they're educated, VC money ideally would not pull out as fast, right? But it really depends on the type of VC and how educated they are. And I mean, this is what we've been talking about. You guys are trying to build a VC by techies. Most VCs I know, they're not techies, they're business people understanding little deep tech, trying to make investment decisions about projects that are more and more deep tech. So I think, yes, VC is in there for the long, but it's also very inflexible, and there is some kind of, you have a gatekeeper position. If you look at VCs, they're white male dominated. The investment decisions they make reflect that. So, but markets are democratic, and democracy is not always educated. It goes in hype cycles. Yeah, I'm not saying it's better or worse, it's just very different. And I think we will have some kind of agency, principal agent structures. I mean, what are we doing here? What did I just suggest? I said that if you don't understand the technology, look at the people who understand the technology. So trustless trust isn't really applicable. Because if you don't understand